Welcome, everyone. My name is Jackie Hefner, and I am here from Pacific Northwest Publishing. I have with me here today Dr. William Jensen, the lead author of the Tough Kids series of books. He's got a lot of information for you today, so I'm not going to keep you long, but before I let Bill get started, I have a couple quick details to review. If you have questions about the content along the way, you can submit them in the Q&A box on the right side of your screen at any time. Bill will address those questions at the end of the session for us. The Q&A, you can get to that tab if you don't see it on your screen. If you're a PC user, there'll be an icon with a question mark in the upper right side of your screen. If you're a Mac user, you'll find that in the lower right corner of your screen. If you have questions, make sure to send them and not just to the presenter so that I can track them and go through them with Bill. If you have technical issues, you can also send a message in that Q&A box, and we'll do what we can to assist you. Sometimes we have found with folks in school settings that if everybody goes to the lab and jumps on the computers all at once, that your audio may get spotty. If you have that problem, let us know. We can send you the information to call in by phone. We, as always, are recording today's webinar, and we'll send the link out to view the recording in the next couple of days to everybody so that you can go back over the information, or if you have other folks you'd like to share it with. All that said, I'm going to turn things over to Bill.
Thanks, Jackie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right, great. We can get started. First of all, I'd like to thank you for joining me this afternoon. This is a topic that we have really been interested in and put a fair amount of effort and research in it. But before I go on, I know I'll forget this, and then I'm going to feel sad, but I want to acknowledge the people that's really behind what I'm going to show you, and that's the army of graduate students I work with. The information I'll show you today is based on 6 different dissertations done at 2 universities. So it's been really well researched. And then I'd also like to thank Pacific Northwest because they take all of our researchy stuff and make it come to life. So I appreciate that. Now, we're going to talk about Tier 2 in a PBIS, MTSS, or RTI model. And we have sort of a different little view on some aspects, and I'm really happy to answer questions about that. But I'm going to also bore you a little bit with some of the research because that's what goes behind what we've selected. And today, basically, what I'm going to show you are 2 comprehensive interventions that can be used at Tier 2. And we like to think that these interventions are really based for the kid who falls between the cracks. This is a kid who's having difficulty socially, academically, who's on task about 50% of the time and compliant to adult requests about 50% of the time. So let's get started and look and see if I can do this now. I'm not the most technologically capable person in the world. Okay. Perfect. There we go. Who am I? This is what I look like. I was wondering these webinars, you know, what the person looks like. That's me actually at the university. I'm not at the university. I'm at home with my miniature Australian Shepherd who's helping me get through this. I'm a professor, educational psychology. I'm a school psychologist. So a lot of the interventions I'm going to talk about today can be used by either what we call related service personnel or teachers in a classroom. By related service personnel, I mean school psychologists, school counselors, school social workers, BCBAs, behavior specialists, and they're designed so that you can do these in your office but still have a significant impact back in the classroom when you're not there. If you're a teacher, every one of these are adaptable to be done in a classroom. My areas of research interest is, children on the autism spectrum, externalizing disorders, I'll talk about that, interventions and evidence-based interventions, and also how we harm students and don't even realize it. And I'll talk about that because I think that can happen at the Tier 2 level. And as Jackie said, I'm the author of the Tough Kids series, and if you've never seen it, this is some of the books. We've just had one come out with on the right-hand corner at the bottom just today, and boy, are my students excited. This is a functional behavior assessment of bullying behavior with interventions that line up with each of the functions. So this is pretty much what we're into. On the left-hand side and the bottom, that's our social skills training program, and I'll be doing a webinar on that on May 5th. What you can expect, first of all, want to talk about who are your customers at Tier 2. I'll give you an overview of PBIS, RTI, MTSS, and I'm sure I'm mostly preaching to the choir, but there will be somebody out there that doesn't know these models very well. I'm going to talk about problems with specialized groups at Tier 2, so I'd really like you to attend to that. I'm going to talk about how we decide what's evidence-based, and that's going to involve an ES, which you can see to the right there. That's effect sizes. And then we're going to talk about how effective are the most common strategies using that evidence-based practice effect size for Tier 2s. Then we'll talk about the individually packaged ready interventions that I'll be presenting. What I mean by package ready is it all comes to you complete. You don't need me looking over your shoulder to consult with you. And I'm also going to talk about the importance of keystone behaviors, particularly for tough kids, those 50-50, 50% on task, 50% compliant. And I'm going to present on task in a box, and the electronic home note, which is not out yet. It's just coming out next week. It's at the printers. So basically, these are the two products I'll be talking about at the very end. The Tough Kid in a Box, the box implies that everything is in there. Everything you need is in there when you open it up. And then the electronic home notes is something that we're really excited about because it really makes a huge difference for kids, and it's extremely easy for teachers and educators to use. Okay, what is the PBIS, RTI, MTS model? They all kind of mesh together. And what is Tier 2? But first, let me talk about who are your customers. I kind of tried to comb through some of the research that we've done and some of the research that other people have done to look at if you're going to end up with maybe the most severe types of interventions. These are actually Tier 3 interventions, but they lead through by Tier 2, and that is, if you're at the point where you're timing out a student, you're timing them out from reinforcement, and I mean timing them out to seclusionary kind of setting, or you're restraining the student, these are the things that we know about that. This is what we know. It's going to be referred to you, and if not managed at Tier 2, it's going to go up to Tier 3, and we look at those most severe types of interventions. But this is from the state of Connecticut. They did a study, and they wanted to find out by diagnostic category, who was going to be the most restrained students. That's where you wrestle them to the ground and hold them, or who was going to be put in seclusion where you could not leave. And states have different laws that govern this. Utah has some very good laws. But the idea behind seclusion is that you're separated and you're not allowed to leave. This is the research that we've just done last year, and you can see it lines up with the Connecticut research. I should actually go back to that here and talk about this. But the kids that you're most likely to get are emotionally disturbed kids. You can call them behavior disordered, whatever. Other health impaired, and there's such an overlap between those two. And then kids on the spectrum, ASD kids. And as I said, this is some of the research that we did just last year and presented at NASS, and this is, if you're going to use a timeout procedure, who are you going to use it with the most? And we think it's going to be an ED, BD child or an autistic child on the spectrum, other health impaired. As we go down, you can see it really drops off fast. And these are the behaviors that are going to be coming to you one way or another. Physical aggression towards peers leads the group. Physical aggression towards staff. Non-compliant, that's what we mean by that, 50-50. They're disruptive. They're verbally aggressive, self-injurious, refuse to work, destroy property, inappropriate language, and failure to work. So this is what we know is going to come down the pike. This is based on a national survey we did of 500 special ed teachers that belong to the Council for Children with Behavior Disorders, CCBD. Now, this is the definition that I like to use, and this is the Tough Kid definition, and incorporates most of the stuff I've already talked about. But these students have behavioral excesses. And these excesses is what's most likely going to get them referred to you at a Tier 2 level. What leads the pack here is non-compliant. These students are not compliant, which means they will not follow through with an adult direction 50% of the time. They're aggressive, and that actually means less than non-compliance, because aggression is very low-frequency behavior. They are argumentative with you. They will argue till the cows come home. And if anything's going to get you in trouble as a student with a disability at Tier 2 is if you're non-compliant and argumentative. You destroy property, and you're off-task. Now, I've highlighted non-compliance and off-task in yellow, and there's a very good reason for that when I talk about keystone behaviors. But also at Tier 2, what I think you have to look at are the behavioral deficits that these students experience. They're what we call contingency governed, and they're not rule governed. Contingency governed means the next thing in that child's environment which captures their attention will control their behaviors. And oftentimes, those are peers in unsupervised environments. Now, that's different from the 80% of children at the bottom of the PBIS triangle who are rule governed, which means they've internalized or inculcated rules which they allow to govern their behavior. Not so with the kid that will be referred to you. It's the very next thing that captures their attention. They are socially unskilled, and that's very problematic when we look at what the recommendations are at Tier 2. They are 2 years behind their peers by the time they get to the 6th grade, and it takes about 45 minutes to be excluded by non-disabled peers. If you put them together in an unattended situation, this is Hill Walker's data, it takes their peers 45 minutes to realize that these children are going to try to dominate the social situation, and they do not have nearly as mature of social skills. And they're also academically deficient. 80% are academically deficient, particularly in the reading area. So this is the type of student I'm mostly going to talk about at Tier 2. He's the one I think is going to be referred to you the most. Now, this is the PBIS model. And if we look at it here, I actually had animation in this, but I guess the animation is not going to work. So everything's going to come out all of the time. It's a triangle, and most people are familiar with this triangle. The green part is 80% of the student body. This is where universal procedures, general basic discipline and rules at the whole school level manages these students with no problem whatsoever. Then you bump it up, and you get into the Tier 2 area. That's about 15% of the student body. And these, it depends on where you live, but these are students that's probably had 3 to 5 ODRs, and ODR is an office discipline referral, which separates them out. Now, if you look at the second area where it says prevention there, I'd like you to focus on it. It says specialized groups are recommended for basically coming up with interventions for these students, specialized groups. And then we have tertiary, and a tertiary is targeted or an individual type of intervention. Moving on here, see if I can do this. There we go. And of course, for triangles, this is how we look at it in the Tough Kid series. Our Tough Kid is going to be at the very top of that triangle with the behavioral excesses and deficits. And if you're into response to intervention, this is basically the model for response to intervention. It focuses basically on academics when you kick the tires on this model nationally, okay? And it really focuses on reading, which is very good. Then you have MTSS, which is multiple tiered systems of support, which kind of takes them all and puts them together, both behavior, academics, and others. Let me see if I can do this. This is my fancy little slide showing how PBIS and RTI all come with MTSS. Oh, it's not going to do it. Okay, sorry. I cannot get this to do the animation. Now, this is what I mean by specialized groups and why we worry about them a little bit, okay? And I know you're going to have to put kids in groups, but you should be cognizant of what is happening here. Now, these are children's data from age 4 to 18. Every little dot there is hundreds and hundreds of kids. This is the Achenbach child behavior checklist data, the standardization data for your school psychologist. And black circles are tough kids that are males that have been referred, and tough kids squares are females that have been referred. If you're an open square or an open circle, you're a kid that's not having problems whatsoever, but you're a comparison group. Now, if you notice, these ages go from ages 4 to 18, so I bet they cover most of the issues that you're dealing with as we go along here. Now, I'd like you to look at this. Let's work. Oh, darn. I'm so sorry. Animation doesn't work. But if you look at this first one down here to the left and the bottom right, you'll notice that the tough kids, about age 10, something magically happens. And what magically happens there is they're going to find peers anywhere to hang out with, and these peers are going to have the same problems that they have. And that's really important to realize at Tier 2 levels for interventions. The same with truancy. If you look at this, we've got a functional behavior assessment of truancy that's out there now. It's about the same age. At age 10, these kids start to skip school or have chronic absences. So these are related, and we think basically the driving force behind truancy for a lot of our students is peer influence. And then also you can see to the very right is drugs and alcohol, and you can see at age 10 it skyrockets. Something magic happens at age 10 when you look at that research. And what's happening there is peers have more influence over their behavior than any other factor in their basic life. Okay, this is some research on when interventions harm, and as I said, I'm interested in how we can possibly hurt or harm tough kids. This was published in the American Psychologist, and it was published by Tom DeShawn. And it shows what happens when we group kids together. And they reported 2 studies. One study was at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and they got 119 antisocial teens, and they had 35 match controls. So 119 antisocial teens after age 10 are going to get treatment. And the type of treatment they're going to get is 12 weeks of groups and teaching them pro-social goals and self-regulation behavior. Now, that sounds pretty sweet. You know, I mean, these are antisocial youth, and they're going to get 12 weeks of basically teach them, you know, how to set pro-social goals and how to manage their own behavior. But Sean did something different. He followed these kids for 3 years, so it just wasn't at the termination of the group, which is most studies. He took it out and looked at it for 3 years. Now, the second study is at Temple University in Philadelphia, and this is by June McCord. It's reported in the same paper, and it's called the Cambridge Summerhill Youth Study. They had 125 males in this study, and they broke them into 3 groups. And in the summertime, one of these groups got no summer camp whatsoever. Another group got summer camp for 1 year, and then the third group got summer camp for 2 years. And summer camp is, you know, singing Kumbaya and actually getting academic tutoring, counseling, and recreation. So let's see what happens, because the whole idea behind this is grouping externalizing disorder kids. And when I mean externalizing, it means that tough kid definition I gave you, noncompliance, aggression, argumentative. So this is tobacco use. And you can look down there at baseline. P is the peer group that was all put together for that 12 weeks of treatment. And C is the control group, 38 kids that never got treatment. You can see they start off exactly the same. But at termination of that group, the kids in the peer group are smoking a lot more. By 1 year, they're smoking a heck of a lot more. And if you look at 3 years, they are smoking a lot. The only way DeShawn could describe this behavior in data is that putting kids together engendered support and access to cigarettes. And people say, well, so what? So that's smoking. But we know smoking is an index to other problematic behaviors. This is probably the most telling data here. And this is teachers that didn't know these students had been placed in these groups, and they filled out a behavior checklist for delinquency. And so again, you can see that the groups are not different at baseline. At termination, they start to separate. And by the time you hit the 3rd year out, after their treatment in a group, it is off the record. What Deshawn says is these kids have formed social relationships within that group, exported it to other environments, that is the community and the home, and they reinforce each other for antisocial behavior. So at a Tier 2 level, I think we have to be careful of this. This is the McCord data. This is the kids that went to summer camp and or didn't get to go to summer camp. Now, you can look at the risk ratios, and they track these kids all the way to adulthood. So the first one is your risk if you never got to go to summer camp. Let's hope this next one works. The next one, oh, it doesn't. I am so sorry about that. But what happens with that is it shows a dramatic increase. I'm going to go back here. When they went once, it goes up to about here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. When they went to summer camp twice, it went off the record. So, again, we worry about specialized groups with the possibility of peer influence. And if you think this is a fluke, this is a paper by Janet Hughes, who's a school psychologist. It says, first, do no harm, adverse effects of grouping deviant youth for skills. And if you're a school psychologist, this is in the National Association of School Psychologists New Interventions book. It's a chapter in there. And it's called Deviant Peer Clustering, the Influence Within Public School Settings, Inadvertent Negative Outcomes for Traditional Professional Practices. Now, let me just state this before we move on. I know sometimes you're going to have to put kids in groups for your expertise, for economy, for just the functionality of putting in groups. But this is the issue behind it. If you lose control at the Tier 2 level, I mean, you're not a good group leader, you lose control, you're going to probably make things worse in our view. And I think the reviewers of this, researchers, we really recommend, and this is why a lot of the tough kids have gone to this, if you're going to use groups, and we use groups all the time with tough kids, we really believe in group contingencies. Group contingencies make a huge difference in breaking down that inappropriate peer influence. Okay, here's the interventions for achievement where that chapter came out of. Okay, I'm going to bore you a little bit here with what we call meta-analyses. Then we'll go ahead, this will make a lot more sense. But a meta-analysis in my research area is a specialized review of the research literature that reduces researcher bias. It goes across multiple years, like decades. We have a meta-analysis we're doing now for ASD kids and early ABA that goes back 40 years. And the results of meta-analysis generally includes hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. Medicine uses this to make decisions. And it yields an effect size. And an effect size is the magnitude of the intervention. And there's something called Cohen's, here's a great paper on a meta-analysis of everything that works and doesn't work in special ed that might interest you. But this is called Cohen's matrix. And this is all you need to know, and I will get off this numbers thing. But zero effect size means no change. 0.2 means small change. 0.5 means medium change. 0.8 means a large change. And a 1 effect size means a very large change. Now, if you go up to this normal curve up here where everybody's on unless you live in Lake Wobegon, and you look down here and it says Z-scores, and it's got a 0 Z-score, that's where everybody starts out in baseline. Now, if you can improve that behavior by 1 standard deviation, if you go right up towards that normal curve, you've just about improved 85%. That means it's an 85% impact for that. That's huge. If you can do 2 standard deviation effect sizes, you're at almost a 98% improvement. And if you are, 3 standard deviations, you're almost a 99% improvement. So we look at effect sizes, and this is what I'm going to show you about the interventions that we're going to talk about and recommend. But effect sizes are non-biased and a very good way of getting to know the magnitude of an intervention. Okay. Now, these are meta-analytic findings for common Tier 2 strategies. These are how effective some of the common Tier strategies, two-tiered strategies are, and they're based on hundreds of kids. One of the most commonly set up Tier 2 interventions is social skills training or aggression replacement. The effect sizes for that in changing behaviors out in the environs of the school is 0.196, extremely small. It means that you're probably not going to have a great impact at Tier Level 2 by doing just social skills training. Oh, it's unbelievable. Some people look at grade retention in some states as an intervention to help a kid at Tier 2 if they're not making progress. The overall effect size, if you retain a child for any reason, is minus 0.31. You're making it worse. If the kid is having academic difficulties, it's minus 0.39. You're really making it worse. And if it's for social adjustment, that is, the child is having problem behaviors, it's a minus 0.22. Some Tier 2 interventions really try to focus on bully prevention programs. A lot of great bully prevention programs out there. But the research on them in the meta-analysis shows that they have about the same effect as a social skills training program, about a 0.192. They have very little effect on a bully. Now, the next one is the most commonly used Tier 2 intervention, and it's called the check-in, check-out program. It's called the behavior education program, and the reviews of this and the meta-analysis is the effects of a check-in, check-out program is about 0.34, small. So I wanted to go over these, and this may be upsetting to some of you out there in the audience. I apologize for that. But I'll stand by these results. These are very, very solid meta-analytic results. Now, there's a wonderful meta-analysis out there by Scott States talking about reducing disruptive behaviors in public ed settings, published in School Psych Review. And he was looking at what are some of the most effective interventions that you could do at Tier 2. Self-management is highly effective. It has an effect size of 0.97. That is teaching the child to manage their own behavior. And the next one that he looked at, and Van Est and Davis looked at in a great meta-analysis from School Psych Review, is home notes. And a lot of educators use home notes, and we'll talk about that. But one thing that's really interesting about these home notes, if you use them, is that if the parent doesn't review the note with the child when they go home, the effect size for changing that child's behavior, either academically or behavior-wise, is about 0.6. It's medium. If you can do one thing, if you can get the parent to review that home note each night, the effect size for effectiveness for behavior in academics jumps to 0.9. So this will mean a lot when I talk about the interventions that we've designed and put together. Now, what are the behaviors that are best to modify at Tier 2? And we really like to get people to think in Tier 2 context of what we call keystone behaviors. People say, well, what's a keystone behavior? Well, you can see there, right down on the right is a little arch, and in that arch is that keystone. Now, the idea behind a keystone is as long as that's in place, it supports all those other stones, and it makes an arch. But the moment you take the keystone out, that arch crumbles. And there's been a lot of research done by Forehand, Ducharme, McMahon, and others on looking at what are the keystone behaviors. If you could change that one keystone behavior, that it would automatically impact other target behaviors that are problematic for that student. And the two most robust keystone behaviors that we can look at is number one, noncompliance, and number two, it's on-task behavior. If I can improve your noncompliance, you're going to argue a lot less with adults. You're going to temper tantrums a lot less. If I can improve your on-task behavior and get it from 50 even to 70% on task, I can dramatically impact a lot of the other behaviors that are problematic and interfere with your academics. Okay. Now, self-management and it's basically self-monitoring and self-evaluating your own behavior. It has an effect size of 0.97, and not a lot of people do it. I would be very curious as how many out there who are listening to me right now, where you can walk back to your school and identify anybody using self-management techniques regularly on a tier 2 level. So we're interested in looking at that, and I am very interested at the University of Utah in what we call passive intervention. If you're interested in this and you're motivated, that I can send this intervention to you, or you can get access to this intervention, and you can do it without my help. So that's the whole idea there behind the Amazon.com little box as we look at it. Now, this is our program for On Task in a Box, where everything is basically in this box that we deliver on your doorstep. And I can go through this. So, what is in this that makes any difference at all? Well, of course, you got the box. You have an implementation manual with appendices, and it has something that's really made an impact on the students that we work with. We call Fast Hands Animation. So it has DVDs in there where a fast hand animated character is going to teach you the skills that you need to know. So it's not another adult talking head. We really know that if we want to turn you off, whether you are a tough kid or an ASD student, is have an adult talking head lecturing you. But if I can do it with Fast Hands Animation, you'll pick up that information about 10 times better than you would otherwise. It also has a peer model DVD. And these are stock models of males and females at different ages, where we actually teach the child we're working with to self-monitor that peer model's on-task behavior. Now remember, this can all be done in your office and then have an impact on on-task behavior back in a classroom, or it can be done in a classroom by a teacher. We have a reinforcement spinner, which we're really big on. And this is the reinforcement spinner down here, and it's got all these little pie shapes down here. And if you earn the privilege to spin the spinner, whatever it lands on, you get. And it helps us because if you notice, like number 2 is much smaller than number 3 or number 5. You can put a higher cost, higher valued reinforcer in number 2 and less one in number 5. Okay, it has mystery motivators, which I will talk about. And then it has also in the box 2 motivators. And this motivator is like a doctor's, pager, but you can put it in your pocket or you can clip it on your belt, and you can set the time it will vibrate. And we like to use it at the 1-minute interval when we start, and it will vibrate randomly, signaling the student that they should be self-monitoring their on-task behavior. It's got tracking forms, and it's got self-graphing forms. Now, going through this, I really encourage you to go to Pacific Northwest and click on their sites for the Fast Hands Animation. I can't do it with a webinar because you cannot stream video, but what the student sees is 2 hands. I had a great graduate student, Ben Springer, who could draw anything, and he's got a Sharpie and a tablet, and he draws the definitions and the skills with the steps to need it. So Fast Hands Animation has been big in both this and in the Superheroes social skills program I'll talk about May 5th. Oh, come on here. Okay. The application, the classroom, internet, and office, again, it's for kids who are, 60% or less on task, and you describe in your office, the child is taught in your office how to use the motivator, or if you're a teacher in a classroom, you have to take them separately aside. It teaches them how to monitor when they're back in class, how to self-graph their behavior, okay, and their progress, not you graphing it, they graph it, and monitoring their progress. It also has, as I said, the peer models that they're going to look at in office and judge whether that peer model is on task, and it's got the reinforcement component with a mystery motivator and spinner. Teach the definition of on task and off task. And this is, I try to get in pieces of this so you can fast hands animation, the characters going through it. We teach them very explicitly what on-task and off-task is. And we also how to use the motivator and how to use the self-monitoring form that they will take back from your office and use in a classroom. And this is the fast hands animation on how to use the motivator, and there's 2 of these in the box when they deliver them on your porch. And it goes through step by step on how you use the motivator. There it is vibrating there. As I said, we like to set it randomly at 1 minute when we're starting. Then it's got how do you self-graph your own progress? And this is a really neat way to graph. It's got this grid, and each one of those is a number as you go along the x-axis, and the y-axis is days. So it shows, again, with fast hands animation, how you take your self-monitoring form that you filled out in your classroom, and when you're back in the office with the related service personnel or with the teacher alone, you write the number on that little grid, and then what you do is you connect the data points, and it self-graphs your behavior. Kids love to do it. That's what it ends up looking like, okay, as they go along and they can see their progress. Then they've got their peer models, as I said, that we have them go through, and they practice before they go back in the classroom. And this is just one of our stock peer models here as a 5th grader and working on an assignment. And again, I encourage you to go to Pacific Northwest and see these things in live action, okay? But this is what the research says when we've done this with students. This is the paper we just published in School Psych quarterly on Autism and the effects it has back in a classroom. Now, we had 6 participants here, 5 males, 1 female, and these are their basic standard data. Now, if you look at the baseline in this multiple baseline design study, you'll see that all of our kids are about 50% on task. When we start to do the intervention, you can see it climbs pretty dramatically. And then we have a follow-up at 3 to 4 weeks later on, and you can phase this out. This is the next 3. Of these subjects. I like the one on the top. That he is totally off task. He's on task 0% of the time. So there are kids out there. This is just, if you look at this, this is a basic table of the data, and you can see participant 1, and then we compare them to their peers if you look at that left-hand column. So participant 1 there was 15% on task, but his peers were 77% on task, okay? After the intervention, our participant 1 has jumped to 88%, and that's pretty close to what his peers are. And these are all the effect sizes that we've talked about. This is academic productivity because we got an increase automatically in math production, both accuracy and the number of problems done, which is very interesting for this. And then we have follow-up here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'm going to go ahead here. And this is another study that's just come out. Was not done by my group. It was done by a group out of Mississippi using the on-task in a box with a whole classroom. So the whole classroom learns how to use a motivator. And the teacher has a motivator that buzzes every 2 minutes to start with. But they learn how to self-graph, and they learn also how to self-monitor their behavior. And this is the whole classroom's on-task rate improvement. So we feel that this is a pretty evidence-based intervention at a Tier 2 level. Now, this is the next one, and I'll hurry up here. This is one we've just finished, and this has been so much fun. This is the electronic home note program. And basically what this is, it's going to be an electronic home note that goes from the school to the parents, and hopefully we can get the parents to review the note because that improves the effectiveness from 0.6 to 0.9 effect sizes. So if we can get that parent just to look at the note with the child, it makes a huge difference. Now, I put this cartoon in because this is how a lot of kids get home notes, and this is also referred to as a daily behavior report card, a DVBR, whichever term you wish. But I love it. There you got the mother with a brick in their front room, and she's taking the note off the brick that's come to the window, and it says, it's a note from Kevin's teacher. A lot of home notes are negative, and we really try to design this thing so it is not that way. So the advantage of a home note system It gives you an information link from school to home. You know, it takes little training, forms a parent, gives the student systematic feedback. It's not that the student has to wait. They're almost getting feedback every day. It takes, you know, they take time and judgment, and so you have to be careful of that, okay? Parents can be abusive to the child, so we really, in this product, really emphasize to parents that this should be positive. Parents can refuse to view the note, which happens commonly, and believe it or not, home notes can be used as legal evidence in a due process hearing. So if you indicate that a child's not making progress in a due process hearing, and there's a string of home notes that show that the feedback that the parent and the child get is that he is making progress, it can be very problematic. So you want to make sure that's aligned to reality. It was actually a due process in Utah. Schools, 64% of schools use some form of home note. That's just amazing to me. But the problem with paper home notes is they're lost, they're altered by the student. You know, it involves collecting the notes and summarizing the data. It takes a lot of teacher time, and the parents don't review the notes at home. So this is exactly what we wanted to be. So we developed our program to work on Google Drive, what's called Google Forms. So this program requires you to set up a Google account, okay, and it runs through Google Forms. And it's paperless, it's, you know, tailored. You've got 5 behaviors that you can tailor in this electronic home note, both behaviors and academics. It takes 30 seconds for a teacher to fill this out, okay? And the data, once you do that, is compiled automatically. Put in an Excel sheet for you. I'll show you what that looks like. So you got progress. It also graphs your progress with it. We have a motivation system, particularly for getting parents to review the note with their child, and also for meeting a goal. So this is how it's set up on Google Forms. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, I don't need that book. I can set it up myself. Yeah, you can, but no, you can't, because this program, we had to do some machine language computer programming, one of my graduate students, to get it to do all the things that it does. And we have a key, and you have to patch that key in till you setting up your first home note before it'll do all the wonderful things I'm going to talk about here. How it works. You set up the home note, and it ends up being a little icon, a home note icon on the teacher's desktop. It takes the teacher 30 seconds to fill this note out by just click on the basic app that ends up on the desktop. The teacher just sends that immediately to the parents. It goes to the parents' Google account, so they have to have a Google account also, and it goes to the interventionist. So if you're a school psychologist, school, you know, social worker, it also goes to you. All right, immediately when that teacher sends it. The data, as I said, are compiled in an Excel-type spreadsheet. It automatically graphs that data for the day. And if it's reviewed by the parent, on their computer screen at home, and they reply, and you all reply to emails, you click that little reply button up there. If the parent replies to the interventionist, okay, we've taken the commonly seen out-of-office message that you often get when someone's on vacation that says, I'm out of office. But instead of doing that, when the parent clicks on it, 2 or 3 times randomly during the week, a little message will come up and say, you know, congratulations for reviewing your child's home note. Send your child in for a mystery motivator reward day tomorrow. So the child comes in the next day, and we use something called chart moves, which comes in with this package. And this is what it looks like, a chart move. Let me, hopefully I've got it here. Trying to hurry here. Come on, work. There we go. Oh, this is what the home note looks like that you would set up. And notice it's got a comment section. These are totally tailorable for target behaviors, and you rate from 1 to 10, which is what most DBRs do now, okay? This is what the parent sees on their home screen when they look at it. So they'll see the target behavior, the rating from the teacher, and any comments the teacher has put in there. This is the automatically graphing of everyday home note data And this is the Excel sheet that sets up. If you look at the top there, it's got on task, academically engaged, optional behaviors, and then it's got the teacher's comments to the parents. This is automatically kept in a file. And our reward system is triggered by that, out of office little feature that Google and all emails have. And what we like to do, and you do not get these with the program, you have to buy these yourself. We like to use these color switcher magic markers that are magic. And if you look at the end, they've got a clear ink part there, okay? And then they got an opaque ink part on the other end. This one's red and there's green or whatever. And then we also have our mystery motivator reward spinner. And each of these corresponds to a reward that you do a preference assessment with the child, and you write here, and you change periodically in a water-based pen. So if the child reviews the note with their parents, they have a chance of spinning this, and whatever it lands on, they get. If they also have met their on-task goal, they get to spin it twice, but then they have to pick which reward they prefer the most. And this is what our chart moves look like. If you've noticed, you start down here, or up here, and each one of these little rectangles represents a day and has a diagonal across it. And we've taken those magic pens and we put an invisible dot in there randomly so the child never knows where they're at. And we like to do 2 or 3 weeks. So if the child reviews that home note with the parent, we let them color in that first part of that diagonal. If that dot shows up, they get a spin. If they've met their goal, we only like to work on one goal at a time, they color this in. So this is kind of what it looks like. These are actual chart moves from participants, kids in our research studies. You can see the little dots that show up automatically here. And this one I love. This is a kid who was having all kinds of difficulties, but he loved this program. And if you look right where above start there, you'll see a green filled-in diagonal. He didn't get it that day. He managed to get the pen and try to counterfeit that dot. So, you can tell when something's really reinforcing to a student, all right? So now, let me see here. Come on. Okay, this is what the research indicates. I'm going to do this quickly to open it up. These are on-task behavior ratings with independent observers back in the classroom once we start our on-task home note program. And you can see this is the pre and post again. Now, we don't get up to 80%, but we get close to 70% with this, which is really sweet for us. This is another study. We've done 2 dissertations on this, but it really makes a difference for those, keystone behaviors. But, and this is the on-task rate for the participants. You can see baseline, interventions, and follow-up. And this is the sweet part. This is parent review of our 4 participants across 10 weeks. These parents, 3 of them reviewed the note 100% of the time. And of course, we had the one parent who did it 38% of the time. It's the real world. And this is the second study, if you look at those reviews. So we know we're having an impact there. And we've also done an electronic check-in, check-out program, but we've dropped out the check-in. We've cut the cost and time in half, and we use the electronic home note, but we don't have it go to the parent. We just have it go to the interventionist, and they check out. And this is what our check-in or our check-out program looks like. And these are the data for on-task behaviors, and you can see it's really, really effective. And it has an effect size of about 0.79. So that's pretty much it, and I will turn it over to questions now. Thank you for listening to me yak on here.
Fantastic, Bill. I do have a couple questions that have come in along the way. The first question kind of goes back a bit, and it says, does the age of the student matter for retention? This is one I think you were talking about, holding students back versus moving them on. For example, if the child is young when entering school or for the grade level.
Okay, if you're interested in this, there's a person named Shane Jimerson, who's a wonderful researcher at Santa Barbara, University of California, that did these meta-analyses. And what they found is there was virtually no difference for kids from kindergarten all the way through high school, which is just amazing to me. It looked like every time you retained a kid, you increase their chances of dropping out, by 30%. So if the dropout rate naturally is 30%, you do it once, it goes to 60%. If you do it twice, it's 90%. Now, saying that, we don't know what happens in preschool. We think what happens in preschool is if you've got a group of peers that goes ahead, because these kids are matching themselves to their peers, then it may have an impact on you. If you don't have that, you do not have that peer reference group, it probably does not. So it's really, really wise to look up those meta-analysis by Shane Jimerson. Number 2, got another question, Jackie?
I do. Regarding the electronic home notes, what population of students was that program peer reviewed with?
The 2 studies was done down to the 2nd grade, up to the 6th grade for the electronic home note.
Okay. And then another question coming through on that one, were they urban or suburban students?
They were urban Title I schools, but I should say one thing here too. If you look at the Van Est meta-analysis on home notes, and I hope you would do that, they found virtually no difference in the effects of home notes, okay, from elementary to middle school to high school had an impact. They were all very similar. So the older kids, which people doubt will have an impact, it does have an impact.
Okay, another question for PBIS purposes, do you have a way for teachers to document minor behaviors in the classroom so the PBIS team can easily track this data?
Oh, yeah, I do, okay. And it's critical, and it's critical for all PBIS systems, whether it's out of Oregon or Missouri or Connecticut. I would not do a PBIS system unless I had a data management system for the whole school. So when there are infractions that occur, it's automatically entered into a database so you can see that the whole picture of the school, who's having the most difficulty, where those difficulties are occurring, what time of day they're occurring, and what the behaviors are. And there's one's called Discipline Tracker. One that a lot of people use is SWIFT, which is School-Wide Information System. The very, very best one I love, and you can look it up, is called Educator's Handbook. It is an excellent data tracking system, and it'll give you exactly what you need in fine-grained analysis.
All right, I think that is almost all of our questions. We have a question about using Office 365. Is the program aligned to Office 365? I will pass that feedback on to our team. I don't know that we are looking at other platforms at all, but I certainly will throw that information at them and see if they have any sort of plans for that in the future.
You know, Jackie, I should also just interject here. The platform that we really, really emphasize if you're going to use the electronic home note is it's Google Chrome and Google Drive.
Terrific. I think that looks like it's all of our questions. We're going to give it a moment here, just for more questions to come in. In the meantime, so the Tough Kid on Task and a box materials are available now. The electronic home notes program should be ready to ship mid-March. Bill is going to present a 2-day Tough Kid training, the nuts and bolts of Tough Kids, at our Safe and Civil Schools National Conference in July. So if you're interested in that, you can contact us for more information. If you have questions about the Tough Kid materials or these materials, feel free to reach out to us. My number is 866-542-1490, or you can respond to the emails that we've been sending. We will send out a link to the recorded webinar by the end of the week or first of next, and so if you had trouble with the audio, and we do apologize for that, for the folks that had some stumbling, that recording should be a better version of this. And I don't see any other questions coming in, Bill, so I think we are good.
All right, Jackie, thank you so much, and thank you for attending the webinar. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for taking the time to share this information today, and thanks to everybody who participated.